by the way, I should say, matter of days before everybody meets in Copenhagen, there will be the EU-China summit. The EU-China summit takes place, lots of summit meetings take place in the course of a presidency, but the EU-China summit will be particularly important because it'll be so close to the beginning of Copenhagen. And here, Sweden, as the EU presidency that will chair this summit from our perspective, has a great opportunity. What we're doing in the context of that summit is agreeing much improved and much more significant cooperation bilaterally with China on developing low-carbon economic areas and also on carbon capture and storage. So try to turn coal into clean coal. And if you look at the reasons why the Chinese economy is going to emit so much carbon over the course of the next 20, 25, 30 years, unless something happens, it is about coal, because so much of China's growth is fueled by the growth in coal. So if we can do something in carbon capture and storage, so we can turn coal clean, then this obviously will make an enormous difference. So we are doing a lot in this context, and this is one of those areas where Sweden plays a particularly important role.
And clean coal is quite controversial in environmental circles. Many environmental organizations say that no such thing exists. But I know that it is official policy of the United Kingdom that you are committed to clean coal as one potential solution to climate change.
Yeah, I mean, I think we would rather be in a different place. We'd rather be on a different planet sometimes on this question. But the reality is that China is going to grow, and it is going to use coal for doing it. If we're being realistic about this, rather than idealistic about this, China is not going to fuel 8, 9, 10% global growth every year by investing in wind farms. That's going to be part of the solution. It is part of the solution today, but it's not going to happen fast enough. China is going to continue to use coal. So what we've got to do is to find viable solutions to the sequestration of carbon from coal in power stations, and find ways of storing that safely. There are a number of studies underway at the moment. We're committed to financing 12 of these by 2020. We've got one in the context of the EU-China summit underway at the moment that we think we can accelerate by agreement between ourselves and the Chinese. So this is a really important piece of work, and it's something that we realistically just have to do.
Now, you mentioned the China-EU summit, which is coming up before Copenhagen, and there's a number of other big international gatherings just today. Was it yesterday? The
APEC.
Yeah. APEC meeting, where President Obama of the United States was there, along with
yes.
other
the Asia-Pacific leaders. That's right. Yeah.
And in each of these big meetings, there is different signals in diplomatic code, perhaps being sent out about what to expect from Copenhagen. And as a seasoned diplomat yourself, what are you feeling in the air at the moment about the prospects of Copenhagen in a sort of realistic way, to put this, so to speak?
Yeah, well, you're right. And actually, of course, what we are in, any seasoned diplomat would see this as the pre-negotiation stage. Now, no negotiation, unless it's a particularly poor negotiation, is ever characterized by one of the negotiating parties standing up before the negotiation and saying, "Hi, look, I'm ready to do a deal." This is not the way that this works. So it's absolutely inevitable, and it's entirely predictable that you find a lot of hard positions emerging at this stage in the process. I sort of go back to the point that I made earlier, that what we know from the context that we have with the countries concerned is that there is a willingness, a desire, a seriousness about doing a deal, but it's the terms of the deal that are going to be the difficulty. It's going to be the question of how much financing and who takes responsibility. It's going to be a question of what volume of reduction of greenhouse gas, and it's going to be a question of precisely how the governance structures work that regulate this agreement. I come back to this point. I think we are getting ourselves into a position in which we will have this global agreement. But I think at Copenhagen, what we're gunning for now, we really need to see a binding political agreement that contains the main elements of the deal. And here, of course, the positions are very tough at the moment. But we think that, we've very important to get all of the leaders, the key leaders, around the table in Copenhagen, and actually then to start talking seriously. And that will be really, I think, how it gets done. The key is that over a day and a half, all of the leaders of the big economies in the world sit down, and developing economies, sit down around the table in Copenhagen and say, yes, we're going to do this now, and this is the deal we're going to do.
And who has the powers to make those sort of commitments? Is it the chief negotiator from each country? Is it the head of state? Who actually says, yes, this is the position of the United Kingdom, yes, this is the position of the EU, yes, this is the position of the United States?
Well, this is a good question, because in effect, what's happening in Bonn and Barcelona and all of these preparatory meetings is that the chief negotiators are the people who are sitting down and talking. When you get to a summit, and the point about a summit is that is the final point of accountability. The buck stops with those guys sitting around the table, and they are the ones at the end of the day who are accountable to their electorates for the decisions that they take. And that is the ultimate sanction. That's the point at which the decision has to be taken. So this is why we think it's very important that all of the leaders of the big economies and the developing economies actually turn up in Copenhagen themselves and sit down together and do this negotiation around the table, because that will be what will create the dynamic. These are the people who are accountable and empowered to do that deal. So, we've been working with the Swedes and with others to try to inspire as many people as possible, as many of the leaders of the countries as possible to turn up. Gordon Brown was pretty much, I think, just about the first person who stood up and said, I will be in Copenhagen, and I think everybody else should be as well. He said it at the United Nations in the context of the UN General Assembly meeting and Ban Ki-moon's climate meeting in September. He completed that finished the meeting saying, I'll be there, and I challenge everybody else to come with me so that we can do that deal. So we're very, very keen to make sure that as many people as possible turn up, because that creates the dynamic that will do the deal.
So Gordon Brown, check, but the rest of the guest list is still quite fluid at this point.
It's getting longer by the day. It's getting longer by the day, and we're very encouraged by the progress that we've been making, but it needs all of us, including advocates such as yourselves.
I'll be there.
That's the value of the work that you do, is encouraging people to whom these guys are accountable, actually to have a view and to talk and to create the momentum.